The Torah portion for this Shabbat is Parshat Lech Lecha. And in this amazing passage, the Holy One speaks to Avram for the first time. And the Holy One says to Avram, Lech Lecha, get yourself going from the land, from the place of your birth, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. What draws Abraham to that land? Why is it that since that moment nearly 4,000 years ago, all of us seem somehow drawn to that land? As we know, God doesn't ask Avram to venture to the land because of its rich mineral content or because of its vast natural resources. God asks Avram to follow an idea, a set of value propositions and principles. The Holy One says to Avram, leave behind your antiquated and inferior notions of what really matters in life. You think it matters if you're laden with riches and wealth? You think it matters if you have power or prowess? You think it matters the things you can see and touch, what you can fashion with your hands? It's not. It's not. Avram, leave all that behind. Stop worshiping what you can see with the eyes in your head and start believing in the things you can only see with your heart. And I want you to know, Avram, the Holy One says, if you are willing to make a covenant with me, a covenant in which we chase something else, ideas, values, principles, all that makes for a sanctified existence and holiness in the midst of human experience, then and only then will you be a blessing. Now, what is the land that God will show Abraham? It's not just the lands of the Galilee, the hills of Judea and Samaria, the Shephelah, the coastal plain, or the Arava. But it is the ideals on which we will build that nation and that land. God asks Abraham to go throughout the land in this week's Parsha, but not to discover its geographic features, such as they are. God wants Avram to discover wisdom and understanding, knowledge and awareness. God wants Avram to discover justice and righteousness, compassion and love. God wants Avram to discover drive and grit and determination, and to discover awe and wonder and miracle. God wants Avram to discover tranquility and humility, freedom and peace. In chapter 15 of the book of Genesis, in this week's Parsha, Avram finds himself lost and confused. Having himself finished a campaign of war, the land is not his. The vision is not his. And he lacks a child, a successor, to carry on and forward the ideas and ideals that God has asked him to follow. And so the Holy One brings him outside and says to him, look up. See if you can count the stars. I dare you, because that's going to be the number of your descendants. And so Abraham believed in God. And he believed in that light. And God said, I brought you out of the land of the Chaldeans, from Ur, from a nowhere, to give you this land to inherit it. There's been so much bantering in academic letters, campus protests, articles in print, online, on screen, in interviews, conversations about this idea that Zionism is a colonial enterprise, and that all of us bear a responsibility to participate in decolonization. Decolonization is about cultural, psychological, and economic freedom for indigenous people with the goal of achieving indigenous sovereignty, the right and ability of indigenous people to practice self-determination over their land, cultures, and political and economic systems. But in the land of Israel, it's hard to know who are the indigenous people. In the 1880s, a census was taken, and that in the lands that span between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, there were just shy of 500,000 people. About 450,000 people of Arab descent and 25,000 Jews. You know how many people live in that same territory today? Well over 14 million people. 75 years ago, the Jews came from around the world to return to their, colonized homeland. What inspired them to come? Well, thousands came from the smoldering wreckage of their homes in Europe. Thousands more came after being expelled from their homes in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Yemen, Iraq, Iran. Thousands more came because, like Abraham, they were chasing an idea enshrined in Torah and tradition and encapsulated in Israel's Declaration of Independence. We don't defend that land because of the land itself, for to worship the land is the greatest idolatry anyone could commit. That's what our enemies do. Our enemies care nothing about values and principles. They care only for a hunk of real estate. And we care less about the real estate and about the idea on which that real estate is to be built. Because that land is our home. It's always been our home. Forever it's been our home. We may have dwelt in every corner of the world, on every inhabited continent, in great cities, small villages, and the International Space Station, in tenement houses and farmhouses and mountains, plains, and by the seashore. But Israel, Eretz Yisrael, has always been our home. And so we cannot be asked to decolonize a place which is our home. We will not be expelled, and we will not be moved. We will not be moved because we worship the land. We will not be moved because we worship something much higher than that. And so as we are forced to wage a war we did not choose, a war we wish we did not have to fight, a war that will cause untold suffering to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of innocent people, we must wage it. Because if we give up on our land, we give up on the ideal. We give up on that which Abraham taught us is not only our birthright, but our blessing. And if we can hold on to our ideas and our ideals, even in the midst of this terrible fight which we are now forced to wage, then perhaps, like Abraham was promised, we will be a blessing. Through us will all the nations of the world find freedom from tyranny, from terror, from violence, and perhaps together, someday, like Isaiah promised, we can beat our swords into plowshares, our spears into pruning hooks, and nation will not lift up sword against nation, nor will they study war anymore. Shabbat Shalom.